Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 184, Discourse. Cha province was hit by an unbroken spell of wet weather in the 10th month, and the sound of rain drumming rhythmically against the banana leaves outside the windows was audible even with the curtains down. Luo Mu was not in his official robes but was wearing normal robes as he sat in the seat to the right of the guest of honor. He surveyed his surroundings and discovered that the interior of this tea house was already filled to the brim with people. Guests hailed from all corners of the land, and a sizable number of them were wearing sandals and rain cloaks made of straw. The incense by the window burned out just after midday. Luo Mu heard movements and straightened up to look at the door, where he saw that oil paper umbrella swaying slightly aside to reveal that figure in darkish blue scholar attire beneath. The latter's large, meandering sleeves rested on his knees, with a cat lounging between them. Delicate wrist bones peeked out under those sleeves, accentuating those fingers of his and making them appear all the more long, slender, and strong. Yao Wenyu bent over in his wheelchair and said with sincerity, "My apologies for having kept the various elders waiting." The little wheels rolled over the wooden floorboards as Qiao Tianya pushed Yao Wenyu in. Murmurs of whispers promptly rose in the room. Those who had not removed their woven hats earlier took them off now one after another. Countless gazes fell upon Yao Wenyu, watching him attentively. Yao Wenyu came to a stop before the round window. "We have all gathered here today to attend the discourse our young friend Yuan Zhou here has invited us to." Elder Mei of Qin province, who was smoking his pipe, tapped it and looked at Yao Wenyu. "It has been a year since we last met, and my young friend's poise has far surpassed that of before." Tea had already been served, and that particular incense was lit up yet again. A so-called discourse was simply an oral conversation. Host and guests sat facing each other, and they would absolutely not touch upon political affairs or civil issues, only on profound and arcane subjects. This was why Luo Mu was not wearing his official attire today. They had to go back and forth with one another as they engaged in verbal discussions while seated in the venue, and this required the participants to be not only erudite and insightful but also poetically eloquent. Yao Wenyu, having traversed all over the world in his search for knowledge, was adept at the art of it, which was why his one invitation could garner hundreds of responses, allowing him to organize a dialogue in Cha province. He was an articulate conversationalist in the past, and his ideas were original and distinctive. As he did not enter civil service despite being born in a noble clan, he was far more popular than Hai Lianji among the recluses who were averse to politics. Elder Mei had already been waiting for an hour, so he cut to the chase after the exchange of customary greetings. "I see that my young friend has changed." Yao Wenyu answered, "This body is not my own, this change does not reflect my own." Elder Mei ceased smoking his pipe. "I can see it with my own eyes. If you have not changed, why aren't you standing up?" Yao Wenyu put down the horsetail whisk he had just been holding onto. "Was I standing a year ago when I conversed with you in Qin province?" "Of course you were," Elder Mei said. Yao Wenyu thus replied. "Then, I'm still standing right now." Luo Mu had once participated in such a discourse when he had been pursuing his studies in Deng province. However, that had been merely an informal discussion among fellow students of the academy. Kong Ling was also talented at sophistry, but for some reason, he had not shown up today. The conversation continued, as did the drizzle outside. Everyone in attendance was listening with bated breath and rapt attention. With his back leaning against the door, Qiao Tianya watched the raindrops splash on the sides of the eaves and cast a hazy veil over the mountains in the distance. Yao Wenyu's voice was crystal clear, and his calm and collected answers seemed to fall like weaky stones he let drop in the courtyard, one at a time, pitter-pattering in this rain. Asterisk. Li Jianting sat in her seat and asked Shueziaozuo, "Since a discourse can convene the wise and virtuous together, why isn't the Imperial College organizing one?" Shueziaozuo closed the book and answered her with a question, "What kind of people can participate in it?" All the learned men in the world, Li Jianting replied. That's not right. Xue Xiaozuo looked Li Jianting in the eyes. It's those who have nothing to worry about in the world. Xue Xiaozuo participated in such discourses before, although not that many times. To court officials like him, Zhang Qingshan and the others, these so-called intellectual and philosophical conversations were mere rhetoric, since the participants discussed neither state affairs nor civil and agricultural matters. These discussions were popular in the 13 cities of Juexi, followed by the 8 cities of Chu capital. Pan Lin and the other young masters of the noble clans held Yao Wenyu in such high esteem because Yao Wenyu rarely touched on political affairs, which was kind of unconventional. But such unconventionality had to be built on the premise that he did not have to worry about the basic necessities like food and clothes. Such conversations went extinct in Zongbo after the Xian era. Was it because of the lack of learned scholars in Zongbo? No, the real reason was that there was no longer a person who wasn't starving in Zongbo. Li Jianting pondered it over for a moment. In that case, what use is there for Yao Wenyu to invite all of these people without a care in the world? After a moment's silence, Xue Xiaozuo turned his gaze to look at the swaying banana leaves in front of the window. The rain poured with urgency, as though this was the same day he had played Wiki with Yao Wenyu. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The sky had already darkened outside the tea house, but the dialogue had yet to end. Elder Mei, being advanced in age, was tired from all the sitting. He was debating with Yao Wenyu over the nature of the changed and the unchanged, and he had already drunk several cups of tea to moisten his throat. Elder Mei cleared his throat. The change I'm talking about is the physical changes before our eyes, and it's not just that. You have changed, and so have the times and the world. You're no longer the same you as you have been earlier, even more so the you from 1 year ago. All eyes fell upon Yao Wenyu, waiting for his answer. But Yao Wenyu slowly lowered his sleeves and bowed to Elder Mei from his wheelchair. You are absolutely right. His words sparked an uproar the moment they left his mouth. This debate was clearly not over. They came all the way here from afar just to hear them duke it out until a clear victor emerged. Who would have expected Yao Wenyu to simply concede defeat of his own accord? Gone is the glory of the Yanji reign. Great Zhou is already on the wane. With the invasion by our foreign enemies in the northeast and the collusion of officials and merchants in the southwest, just how many places are there left for us in this world to converse freely about the mysteries of the universe? A commotion broke out in the room at these words. An enraged Elder Mei tossed his pipe aside and covered his nose and mouth with his sleeve. Foul! 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 What an unbearable stench! How intolerably vulgar! Why has Yao Wenyu become high-ranchy? The tea tables clattered noisily as several people rose to their feet. Luo Mu hurriedly got up too and attempted to dissuade the others, but then he heard Yao Wenyu, who was before the window, laughed. The more he laughed, the louder his laughter became. Look at how severe the misappropriations of the commoners' fields in the 8 cities are. The vision of the starved dead dotting the streets everywhere is no longer just empty talk. I've changed, and so has the world. You are right smacked in the middle of it. How long can you remain unchanged for? Elder Mei originally wanted to leave, but on hearing Yao Wenyu, he could not refrain from rebutting, without what keeps them alive, all living creatures will perish. To change or not to change is the natural order of the world. You strayed from the way and fell into the trappings of this secular world. Are you trying to emulate Qi Huilian and Hai Lianji by being a virtuous gentleman? Yao Wenyu said, the one who forced this change on me today is none other than you and this very society. Elder Mei could barely catch his breath as he held onto the table and said, letting nature take its course is the natural order of things. What has Qi Huilian changed? And what has Hai Lianji changed? You are following in their footsteps. Yuanzhou, oh, Yuanzhou. This is but a futile attempt. Yao Wenyu schooled his expression and said, since you speak of the natural order of things, then this empire shall change as it ought to, and this world will descend into anarchy as it must. You may very well continue to stand by and do nothing if you so wish. I have already abandoned my way, I'm going to step into this turbulent world. Elder May stomped his feet in anxiety and yelled like a child, "No, come back. Get back here." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Shueziaozuo subscribed to the philosophy that one must live or die with his principles. This was the creed that Grand Tutor Qi believed in, as did Secretariat Elder Hai. Yao Wenyu was the only one amongst them who didn't. But Yao Wenyu's move today was a clear break from his past belief in letting nature run its course. This was a declaration to all that he had forsaken his original self to become a man of the secular world. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Pelts of raindrops fell right before Qiao Tianya's eyes into the water puddles, where they burst into tiny sprays of water and stirred up ripples. A small fish with fine scales leaped out of a ripple, and Kong Ling, who was near the pond, caught it and tossed it back. Fei Shen was holding up the umbrella while Kong Ling and Shen Zequan, both wearing bamboo hats, fished by the pond. Kong Ling cast out the hook again and said, "After today, men with lofty aspirations ought to be flocking to Tse province." Shen Zequan said as he held onto the fishing rod, "If men with lofty aspirations were this easy to obtain, how would I have kept missing Mister each time?" Kong Ling laughed. He avoided answering and merely lamented, "This move of Yuan Zhou is both a change of path and an undertaking of path." He did it to tell the world that Secretariat Elder Hai's legacy still lives on in Tse province. He's no longer the same man he was before. Shenwei's brush and ink are already in place. Shen Zequan said. Whether Yuan Zhou can redeem his reputation in the hearts of the scholars in the world depends on this lyrical expression of his. Yao Wenyu was attacked by the students during the initial Imperial College crisis because of his birth origins, but now, he had taken on a different path from that of Elder May and the others. With the help of Gao Zongxiang's highly effective and emotive writings, those two legs of his could become a definitive statement of will and ambition. In addition, the questions that were to follow would no doubt include the reason he came to Tse province. If he was guilty of a crime, then why didn't the imperial court send anyone to arrest him? By thinking down the line of this question, one would be able to see a zongbo that had already been fractured. Due to the passing of Emperor Tianchen, the imperial examinations held in spring were done away with. Following right after, Secretariat Elder Hai remonstrated with his death, and the imperial college students attacked the officials of humble origins from all sides. Many people handed in their resignations during this period, and Chu capital still has to maintain the stability of the three parties this winter. Shen Zequan swung his fishing rod. Shueziaozuo already has half a foot in the Grand Secretariat by virtue of the heir apparent to the throne. For this reason, the Empress Dowager must suppress the rational faction led by him. She can't let him become a minister with genuine regent powers in his hands. In that case, when will he be able to fulfill his promise to the Imperial College? He and Yuan Zhou are both old acquaintances and fellow students under the same teacher, so there must be more than meets the eye now that Yuan Zhou has switched to my camp. Moreover, the transgressions of the Li clan are already a fact long known to all, and copycats are popping up one after another, seeing that King Yi of Fan province has yet to be taken down. Even if Shueziaozuo wants to retaliate and fight back now, his hands are tied. No matter how you look at it, all he can do this winter is to get beaten. The mess created by the noble clans is way too great. Kong Ling shook his head as he grasped his fishing rod. The Empress Dowager refuses to release her grip on power, and everyone in the Grand Secretariat has lost heart. Meanwhile, Shueziaozuo is still in the fledgling stage of his authority. As long as the three parties remain locked in a stalemate, the 8 cities' misappropriation of commoners' fields will remain unresolved. The longer this drags on, the more advantageous it will be for the prefectural lord. Just as they had discussed here, Gao Zongxiang's essays went into circulation a few days later. The tailwind Hai Lianji left behind had not fizzled out at all. As long as their message was sincere, it could evoke a collective, emotional sigh. The contents of Yao Wenyu's discourse in Cha province had long ceased to be important. What was crucial was that even the ignorant students who could not tell one grain from another had to face up to the fact now. And that was, in just 6 months, Chu capital had completely lost the ability to maintain stability in its empire. The man Yao Wenyu had aligned himself with was called Shenzequan, a felonious subject who rebelled and fled Chu capital half a year ago with Xiao Qi. However, they had not only escaped execution, but they even grew in power to become an upstart. The Empress Dowager could not command the Qidong garrison troops into action, so Han Cheng came out of obscurity once more to ask the 8 great training divisions to dispatch troops to exterminate Shenzequan, who was far away in Tse province. But the Ministry of War declined on the grounds that Chu capital had no military generals. The conference was a very unpleasant one, and with the end of the year closing in on them, the relationship between the 3 sides grew increasingly tense. Once the snow started falling, the number of refugees who sought asylum in Tse province and Cha province grew exorbitantly. At the same time that Tantai, who was recruiting soldiers for the garrison troops in Dun province, the Jinyi Wei were also enlisting new members. Shenzequan planned to put Haragu together with the Jinyi Wei. By the time Shenzequan realized it, the 12th month had come, and just as he was getting his New Year gifts ready, a bout of unprecedented heavy snow came calling at Libei. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 185, Hanjian. Heaven and earth were a vast expanse of white where the frigid wind swept past and sent the salt like snow rustling. Owing to the severe collapse of the bridle paths, it was practically impossible for the grain wagons to enter the war zone. Xiao Qi left Lang Tao Shuijin at Bianbo camp and led his men to dig the snow for 2 days. Wu Ziu tightened his collar in the chilly wind and covered up his mouth and nose. He rubbed his frozen hands together, his voice muffled as he spoke. Damn it, I just took a nap, and the path gets all blocked up again with snow. When will this end? Chen Yang never touched wine when he was on duty, but even he could not stand it any longer and kept chugging down on horseback until his stomach burned. The closer we get to the northeast, the colder it becomes. Fortunately, the prefectural lord sent the winter coats over before the 10th month. Otherwise, who knows how many brothers would have succumbed to the cold. It's such a cold day. Gu Jin squatted on the ground and shook his head, and the armor weighs a ton. The battle steeds won't be able to stand it. The battle steeds of Libei were not as tolerant of the cold as the Bianchis ponies. It was an uphill task preparing fodder for the stables each time winter came around. The horses had it harder than the humans. Keep digging. Xiao Qi said, we have to make it to the battlegrounds by tonight. It was simply impossible to see the white puff of air Xiao Qi exhaled. The wind was so strong that it sent his cloak flapping noisily. There was no end in sight ahead, and the blocked bridle path north of the Shazan camp was a dead end, so he could only lead his convoy squad to take a long detour from the 3 great training divisions of Liaoyang. The supplies in Sha'er camp had run out and they could only rely on Shai camp to replenish stocks. As these 2 camps jointly undertook the operational combat missions on the battlefields, their equipment was expended rather swiftly. They had gathered together a batch of military craftsmen after the 11th month, and with more than 50,000 men in total, a staggeringly large amount of materials was needed. Xiao Qi had to keep up with the uninterrupted flow of supply to both fronts. But the one in the most challenging position was Zhao Hui, who was stationed to the west of the Tudalong banner. The heavy snow had persisted for several days, and a path that had caved in once before was no longer usable. The path Xiao Qi had repaired with wooden planks could not withstand the load of such heavy snowfall. Coupled with the heavy weight of the grain wagons, Xiao Qi did not dare pass through without careful consideration. He could only let Zhao Hui wait for a few more days as he set off from the battlegrounds with the grain wagons in tow and detoured around the Tudalong banner. Gu Jin blew hard on his palms and stood up to yell, "Keep digging." The convoy squad had not had a day's rest in the past 3 months, but none of the soldiers complained because Xiao Qiye did not have a break either. They were practically running in circles all over Libei's territory. Even with his eyes closed now, Xiao Qiye could point out which path was the quickest shortcut to take. Xiao Qiye had astonishing stamina and energy. Even as he was transporting supplies, he did not delay recovering the use of his right arm. Just a few days in Bianbo camp before setting off, he was still drawing the conqueror's bow, and that ear-piercing twang of the bowstring had left the Libei armored cavalry dumbstruck. Xiao Qiye arrived at the site of the battle at the hour of Zhou, which was also when Xiao Fangxiu had just withdrawn from the battlefield. Father and son both cut sorry figures before the dimly illuminated tent. Xiao Fangxiu took off his helmet. It was such a cold day, and yet, he had run until he was all drenched in sweat. He took a hot handkerchief to wipe his face, then nodded in a signal to Xiao Qiye before bending over to enter the military tent. Both of the great commanding generals, Zhou Qianqiu and Zhang Sheng, were present in the tent, along with the deputy generals and brigade commanders from the 2 camps. All of them looked utterly exhausted. "This is really damn bizarre." Xiao Fangxiu tossed the handkerchief on the table. "Their ponies' asses are almost trailing on the ground. How can they still run so fast in the heavy snow? No matter what, we cannot retreat again." Zhou Qianqiu stood before the map and pointed to the southeastern corner of the Tudalong banner. "If we retreat any further, this place will fall into the enemy's hands too. When that happens, Zhao Hui's remaining route for supplies will be cut off. In just one winter, Hassan can drag out the battle and wear him down to his death at the Tudalong banner." Spring came late in Libei. This bout of snow would last until the 3rd month next year at the very least. Even if Zhao Hui had stockpiled food in Changzhou camp, the entire army could not afford to deplete their equipment supplies. There were no batches of military craftsmen over at the Changzhou camp. According to the military reports, Zhang Sheng kicked off his boots and poured out the melted snow within it. Hassan has been giving Zhao Hui's troops the slip lately. He saw that the supplies can't be restocked for the time being and so wants to wear Zhao Hui down first. Xiao Qiye sat in the corner and ate his flatbread with milk tea. Despite wolfing down his food, he did not miss any of the words they had spoken about at length. After a moment of silence, Xiao Fangxiu said while staring at the map, "This is a warning sign of an impending surprise attack by Hassan." Xiao Qiye thought so, too. Hassan was wearing Zhao Hui down to exhaust him. The Libei armored cavalry consumed too much equipment, and their battle steads were no match for the ponies at all during winter. The amount of assistance Shai camp could render Zhao Hui now that the bridle paths had collapsed was too minimal, and the Changzhou camp still had no reinforcements to back them. When Guo Wulai had been stationed here, the 3 great training divisions of Liu Yang led by Zhao Hui served as his reinforcements. But now that Zhao Hui had stepped to the forefront, all he had to back him up was the remaining troops who were guarding the northeast supply route. Moreover, those troops had no direct access to him due to the heavy snow. "The supplies have already made it here." Xiao Fangxiu looked back at Xiao Qiye. "Hassan's ambush will surely take place within these 2 days. If they continued waiting it out, Xiao Qiye would have to move up north, and Hassan would have missed his opportunity. Early tomorrow morning, I will lead Squad 3 to lie in wait over here." Xiao Fangxiu shifted his fingers. "Qianqiu will guard the camp, and old Zhang will head over from around the back. We'll form a net here. At the very least, we have to knock Hassan off his momentum. This lad is not only good at field operations but also in going on the offensive and defensive. We can't let him find a place that can provide him with cover. All we can do is to box him in on the snow field." The armored cavalry was a wall in motion. If they flanked him from both sides, Hassan would have no choice but to collide into a wall. Restricting the pace of the Biancha cavalry's advancement was equivalent to chopping off their legs. Even after they fell to the ground, the Libai armored cavalry would still remain a wall that would prove tough for the Bianchi scimitars and piked daggers to break out of. Xiao Qiye did not leave after the meeting ended. Zhou Qianqiu came over and patted Xiao Qiye on his right arm. "Have your wounds healed?" Xiao Qiye lifted up his arm and moved it around. "No problem there with holding a blade or pulling a bow. We have to thank Lanzhou during the spring festival," Zhou Qianqiu said with a laugh. "The winter coats this time are all real cotton. For the last few years, the clothes that were delivered by Chu capital were all padded with paper scraps. Your eldest sister-in-law wrote to say that she would personally cook a meal to thank Lanzhou when he comes." Xiao Qiye glanced at Xiao Fangxiu, then replied humbly, "This is what he ought to do. It's nothing deserving of thanks from eldest sister-in-law. A couple of days ago, he even sent a letter to announce that the New Year gifts had been prepared. All that's left is for the New Year to come around." Xiao Fangxiu sprinkled fine salt into his own bowl, as though he had not heard their conversation. "So," Zhou Qianqiu said, "your father praised him for quite a number of days. During the spring festival, let's..." Xiao Fangxiu said with certainty. "Nope, I've never praised him before." "Right." Zhou Qianqiu threw Xiao Qiye a meaningful glance. "I was the one showering him with praise. Why aren't you retiring to your tent for the night?" Xiao Fangxiu asked Xiao Qiye. Xiao Qiye watched him drink up his milk tea before responding. "Will you be donning heavy armor when you head out to lay an ambush tomorrow? How am I supposed to intercept Hassan without wearing it?" Xiao Fangxiu set his bowl aside. "He's even better at warfare than Amuer." "Then take off your helmet," Xiao Qiye said. "There could be scorpions hidden among Hassan's troops. Without our helmets, how can we be considered an iron wall? If we want to obstruct them in the snow fields, this is our only option." Xiao Fangxiu warmed up his fingers together and contemplated for a while. "According to your report, there are very few scorpions, and it would be too much of a strain for them to fend against the present Libai armored cavalry. Even if there are scorpions among Hassan's troops, there could only be a scattering of them. The armored cavalry is too heavy." Xiao Qiye looked at Xiao Fangxiu. "It's imperative for the armored cavalry to make changes after the beginning of spring next year. If we want to force the Bianchi cavalry back to the east, we have to be prepared for all possibilities. You want to strip off layers of the armored cavalry's armor to lighten its weight." Xiao Fangxiu finally turned his head, "Yet you still can't match their speed." Xiao Qiye did not utter a word as he locked eyes with Xiao Fangxiu. "The troops you trained in Chu capital were all infantrymen, and your experience with battling on horseback comes from Lu Guangbai. But Libai doesn't have the natural geographical advantage that the Bianjun commandery has. If we want to possess a wall, we can only rely on heavy armor." Xiao Fangxiu tossed a few pieces of coal into the brazier. "Your eldest brother shed the weight of the Libai armored cavalry, but we're still unable to break through that line in the east." Xiao Fangxiu looked at the brazier. "Amuer's transformations are simply too fast. He has gotten a clear handle on the Libai armored cavalry in the past few decades. There is no way that simple additions and subtractions can stand up to such a Bianchi cavalry. The armored cavalry must make changes like never before." This was the predicament of the Libai armored cavalry. Amuer succeeded in his training of the Scorpion unit, and looking at the result of their last confrontation, the hammers of this squad were the Libai armored cavalry's nemesis. But would simply removing the helmet be enough of a countermeasure? This would mean that cracks had already begun to show in the Libai armored cavalry's heavy armor, and this put Xiao Fangxiu at a loss for what to do. Still, he had no choice but to continue taking the risk, because this was the only advantage the Libai armored cavalry had left. If they discarded this advantage, they would not be able to hold their own even against the ordinary Bianchi cavalry. Amuer was truly a genius, and Hassan was pretty remarkable, too. Bianchi was now exhibiting certain signs of rejuvenation. It even occurred to Xiao Fangxiu that Amuer would be able to completely merge the 12 tribes by winter next year at the latest. When that time came, the entire front line on the eastern side of Great Zhou would become a war zone. This was the key reason why Qi Ziyan refused to head up north and have a fallout with Liu Bei. She had also seen this monstrous beast from where she stood in Qidong. This was why she could not intimidate Liu Bei because of the strife in Chu capital, for they would inevitably stand on the same battlefield in the future. The enemy had already gotten powerful to the point that it was terrifying. What should they do? Xiao Qiye pillowed his head upon his arms as he lay in bed and contemplated this question over and over in the dark of the night. They possessed the best military craftsmen in the world, and they had a staggering number of them, yet they had no recourse against Amu'er. This was almost about to be a kind of humiliation. There was no way Amu'er was invulnerable. The Bianchi cavalry had their weaknesses too, except that these weaknesses were obscured by their unbelievable speed. They had to remove these from the equation and find a new breakthrough. But it was at this moment that Xiao Qiye was hit with the realization of his own unfamiliarity. He had crossed swords with the Bianchi cavalry far too few times, and all his countermeasures against the Bianchi cavalry were merely armchair strategies. He could not continue to conceive tactics by seeing his foes through a hazy mist. Xiao Qiye could not fall asleep. He turned over and got up to put on his coat. He stepped out of his tent, where he saw Xiao Fangxiu conversing with the soldiers in the camp. When Xiao Fangxiu noticed his presence, he patted the space next to him and handed him a bowl of milk tea after he sat down. It's taboo not to sleep when you have to leave for war tomorrow morning. Xiao Qiye sipped the warm milk tea. When I was the same age as you, I would still bursting with energy even after staying up for 3 days. Xiao Fangxiu's coat was old and worn, and its edges were extremely frayed. It had been mended over and over by Lu Yizi, but even so, he refused to switch to a new one, because this had been sewn by his wife. Xiao Qiye gulped down the tea, frowning as he replied. That was donkeys years ago. As the fire crackled, father and son sat shoulder to shoulder for a long while. Xiao Fangxiu asked, have you realized how exhausting this is yet? Xiao Qiye did not respond. Xiao Fangxiu thus looked at his youngest son. After a moment, he spoke up, you used to want to fly, so you fought to the death to succeed with Meng, and you're still doing the same now that you want to win. Xiao Qiye heaved a sigh. And whose bad habit is this? Xiao Fangxiu let loose a laugh. Not mine. Your mother's. Xiao Qiye rubbed his fingers along the rim of the bowl and paused for a moment. You lost to Amu'er at 23, I lost to Hassan at 23. It took me 7 years to collect my dues for this debt. Firelight that enveloped Xiao Fangxiu's facial features accentuated them, making him appear all the more handsome, and more dignified and awe-inspiring than Xiao Qiye. You understand how that feels. When I lost to him, I couldn't find my way forward. I even thought for a while that I didn't have the talent to be a commander-in-chief. I've seen many outstanding commanding generals at Loxia Pass, many of whom are real geniuses. I suppose you've no idea about this, but the corner of Xiao Fangxiu's mouth curled up in a smile. Qi Xiu was the one in the forefront at that time. He turned Qidong into a force to behold. The chief commander of the 5 commanderies was truly too strong. I looked at him and at them, and I thought I had no talent. There was no way I could stand on the same battlefields as them. The firelight flickered, and a warring scene of glinting spears and armored horses manifested in the shadows. The military banner flapped so hard it looked as if it was going to be torn apart, but it was very peaceful here, as if this was the most stable, tranquil corner of this world. Xiao Fangxiu spread out his right hand and said with downcast eyes, I lost my first battle steed in that battle. However, the Bianchi cavalry left me too little time to recover. They made me extract myself out of that slump swiftly. I could no longer wait for the others, nor feel sorry for myself. When I stood at the very front, I realized that I did not want to lose at all. I only wanted to win. Win. Such a wild ambition sustained Xiao Fangxiu and kept him going. It brought him countless motivation and ultimate glory. In those 7 years, he never dared to stop for a moment. Every single day, he was looking out in the distance at Hanjian Mountains. He had seen through himself. That had been a swift and resolute transformation. He overcame all difficulties, even at the expense of offending his former commanding general to build a stable at Loxia Pass. This alone took him 3 whole years. By the time he truly accomplished it, he was already 28 years old. Xiao Fangxiu scrutinized the lines in his palm and said, "You returned to Libei and focused your attention on both the armored cavalry and imperial army, but you never thought to look at the commanding generals. Guo Wulai hurt Gu Jin. And a feud was thus formed between both of you, but Guo Wulai's meritorious services are legitimate. He is your elder brother's vanguard at Changzhou camp, and his defense of the Tudalong banner is impregnable. Zhang Sheng is a veteran. He has hardly been on the forefront, but the Sha'ir camp, which he is at, is the pivot that holds the lines between boundaries together. He is the foundation that supports us all, whether up north or down south. Ah yeah, what you possess is not just that bit of soldiers, but also the experience that countless soldiers and officers have amassed. You went to Zongbo back then and met Lu Guangbai, but now that you're back in Libei, you aren't willing to learn anything new. Men who are the most familiar with the battlefields of Libei are already standing before you. You've wasted too much time." Xiao Qiye tightened his grip on the teacup. "You want this position?" Xiao Fangxiu slowly clenched his fist. It was as if he was asking both Xiao Qiye and himself at the same time. "But are you truly qualified enough?" Before Xiao Qiye returned to Libei, he had already been rejected by its commanding generals. It was hard for him to describe that feeling. He had indeed felt hurt. He no longer got into any disputes with these people afterward, but it was also from then on that they went their separate ways. Xiao Qiye had been back for so long, and the imperial army was still the imperial army. When he stood within the military tent, he was just so glaringly different from the rest of the commanding generals. He did not need these people to apply ointment for him when he got injured. They gave off the appearance of unity, but they were divided at heart. They could not become one. The tea on the fire started boiling and bubbling over. Xiao Qiye felt that he was like the wolf straying at the edge of the pack. He seemed to have returned, but in truth, he was still standing in the same spot. He watched these people fight with all their might, but there was no place for him amongst them. "You don't need 7 years to defeat Hassan." Xiao Fangxiu gazed at Xiao Qiye and said, "But you must learn to be tolerant." Xiao Fangxiu left the camp at the hour of Chen. The snow fell even more heavily today, which made it easier to get blinded without the helmet acting as a shield. Before he put on his helmet, he whistled at Xiao Qiye. Xiao Qiye came to stand beside the horse, and he tousled Xiao Qiye's hair. "It's too dangerous to advance your troops on snowy nights. Wait for the hour of Mao tomorrow before you set off for the north." As Xiao Fangxiu spoke, he put on his helmet. His voice sounded muffled inside of it. "We'll discuss the detailed route when I return. The hour of Zhou at the latest." Xiao Qiye said. "The snow is too heavy. Any later, and you'll lose your way." "That will depend on the situation." Xiao Fangxiu pulled the reins. "I'm leaving." Xiao Qiye watched as Xiao Fangxiu led his troops out of the camp. Those armored hooves heading north resembled a wandering dragon that was swallowed up by the snow and fog in the blink of an eye. He stood for a while longer, then turned and went into the tent to catch up on his sleep. Xiao Qiye fell into a deep sleep this time around and awoke to the sound of horse hooves. He was not in good spirits, and it took him a few moments of coming around to realize that it was already dark. He sat up and put his clothes on. When he stepped out, he saw soldiers all over the camp. Chen Yang and Gu Jin, who were meant to be on duty at the entrance, were both missing. Xiao Qiye turned around and grabbed hold of someone to ask, "What's going on?" Sha'ir camp met with an ambush. The junior soldier put on his armor swiftly and bowed in a hurry to Xiao Qiye. "We are going to mobilize troops south now to provide reinforcements." Xiao Qiye quickly made his way to the front of the military tent. When he lifted the flap, he was met with the sight of a fully dressed Zoqian Kaiu. The latter was just about to step out. Xiao Qiye asked, "Zhang Sheng hasn't returned yet?" Zoqian Kaiu took large strides forward with a grave expression. "No, it's likely he was stalled. This was a plan to lure us away from the base. Unfortunately, Hassan's presence at Tudalong Banner was but a farce. His real objective is to ambush Sha'ir camp." The bridle paths connecting Sha'ir camp and Shazan camp had been blocked off. Zhang Sheng had made a detour to lay in ambush together with Xiao Fangxiu, resulting in a sharp decrease in the number of troops left to defend the camp. Shai camp was all they could count on to make up for this shortage. "Ah yeah," Zoqian Kaiu said before mounting his horse. "You have to hold down the fort here, there are still provisions in the camp." Xiao Qiye said, "I don't have the authority to mobilize troops." "You can't lead the convoy squad north." Zoqian Kaiu steered the horse around. "Stay here and wait for your father to come back." His horse had already galloped off at the last drop of his words. Xiao Qiye took a couple of steps back to make way for the cavalry behind him. He scanned the vicinity and spotted Chen Yang amidst the chaos before him. "Gu Jin has gone up north to inform his lordship of the situation." Chen Yang hurried over to Xiao Qiye's side. "The snow is too heavy, even men can't fly in this weather. Gu Jin is the only one who is able to find his way through the snow." "At night?" Xiao Qiye asked. "What time did he leave?" "An hour ago," Chen Yang estimated the time. "He will only be back by the hour of Mao." Xiao Qiye froze for a second, then continued to ask, "The hour of Zhou has already passed?" "It's currently 3/4 past the hour of Zhou." Chen Yang glanced worriedly at Xiao Qiye. "Any traces of their tracks have all been covered up by the snow. Squad 3 is probably still in the snowfields, but Zhang Sheng is there too." "Master, his lordship's military strength far exceeds that of Hassan. He'll definitely be able to make it back by the hour of Mao." Anxiety began to eat away at Xiao Qiye. This was an emotion that proved difficult to vent. He did not have the authority to mobilize troops, and the manpower left in Shai camp was not sufficient to sustain a trip up north. All he could do was wait. This was a plan to lure them away from their base, but what did Hassan intend to achieve by launching a sneak attack on Sha'ir camp? Xiao Qiye stared at the map and lifted his finger to trace along the line that Xiao Fangxiu had drawn. That sense of unease started to pervade his entire being, gnawing at him. He seemed to be still standing in Tudalong Banner that rainy night, standing in confrontation with Hassan across the curtain of rain. Sha'ir camp's food supplies were still in Shai camp. As Xiao Qiye had only arrived last night, Zhang Sheng did not manage to transfer the provisions in time. Sha'ir camp's route down to the south had been obstructed by the heavy snow, so raiding Sha'ir camp would neither garner them any food supplies, nor pose a threat to the Shazan camp. So why? Xiao Qiye asked himself in the face of these intricate and complicated routes. The hour of yin passed too slowly. Xiao Qiye kept asking for the time in the military tent. He paced back and forth in the same place and rubbed away those haphazardly drawn lines. He gradually stopped tracing Xiao Fangxiu's path and put himself in Hassan's position. Hassan was an accomplished hunter who was familiar with the bridle paths of Libya. This was already evident back then at the Tudalong Banner. He wore Zhao Hui down and the blizzard became his cover, allowing him to move in and out of the snowfields with ease. Xiao Qiye stopped in his tracks and repeated those words earlier. A chill ran down his spine, so cutting was it that his fingers stiffened. Exceptional hunters would not reveal their targets easily. They were patient, and any weaknesses they exposed were all pretenses to lure in the enemies. Hassan could move freely on the snowfields, which meant that he must know the routes in the north like the back of his hand. He knew which section of the road was suitable for an ambush. For the 6 months Hassan had been on the battlefield in the north, he had spent every day dealing with the Libai armored cavalry. He was practicing all this time, he already had a clear handle on Xiao Fangxiu's rhythm. This was a trap. Hassan trapped Xiao Fangxiu the same way he had trapped Xiao Qiye. He never thought to launch a sneak attack on Changzhou camp in the snowstorm, and he had no interest in the Sha'ir camp. He went around in such a big circle, and this was all for the sake of targeting Xiao Fangxiu. Xiao Qiye abruptly pulled the tent flap open and bumped into Chen Yang's head-on. Chen Yang staggered back and blurted out in a hurry before he got the chance to pay his obeisances, "Gu Jin is back." Xiao Qiye looked out. Not only was Gu Jin back, but even Zhang Sheng had also returned. Xiao Qiye approached them briskly and pushed aside the armored cavalry, who was standing in his way. He kept searching, but there was no Xiao Fangxiu amongst them. Zhang Sheng, who was badly injured, was carried back on a stretcher. The color drained from Xiao Qiye's face when he saw that smashed helmet, and he hissed, "Fuck. It's the scorpions." Gu Jin wiped his face vigorously with the corner of his clothes and said in a hoarse voice, "Master, they hid behind the armors. They had our tokens on them. They disguised themselves as the Libai armored cavalry at the old relay station into Dalong Banner, and they deceived every one of us. Where is my father?" Xiao Qiye grabbed the front of Gu Jin's clothes and enunciated each word of his question. "Ambushed." Half of Jian Sheng's face was covered in blood. The ringing in his ears was pretty bad. With fingers bent, he gripped the edge of the stretcher and mumbled somewhat incoherently, "It happened right under our nose. They are too fast." Gu Jin bit down so hard on his lips they blanched. It was with difficulty that he said under Xiao Qiye's gaze, "I didn't find him, master." Xiao Qiye shoved Gu Jin aside. He whistled before he remembered that he had not brought Lang Tao Shuijin over. He strode a few steps over to the stable and led a horse out before mounting it. Wu Ziu tried to stop Xiao Qiye's horse. "Viceroy, you don't have authority to mobilize troops. You'll be dismissed and investigated for arbitrarily heading up north without permission. We have to first send a message to Sha'ir camp and report." Without looking at Wu Ziu, Xiao Qiye cracked the horsewhip and shot forth like a sharp arrow. "Damn it!" Wu Ziu flung down his helmet where he stood and shouted to his left and right, "Quick, report it to Sha'ir camp." Xiao Qiye galloped among the boundless expanse of heavy snow. The wind tore at his sleeves as he charged along the hoof prints towards the northwest. The cold was penetrating and very quickly, his freezing hands that were gripping the reins turned purplish red. The horse could not keep up with galloping at such speed, so he could only trudge through the heavy snow on foot. With his keen sense of smell, he tracked his way deep into the snowstorm through the devastated battlefield, where he found Xiao Fangxiu in the dark. Xiao Qiye covered his eyes with his frozen fingers and wiped away at them hastily, but a sound he could not contain escaped from his throat. The wind of the Hanjian mountains tousled Xiao Qiye's hair. It was here he stood helplessly, until he eventually burst into gut-wrenching sobs. "Give it back," Xiao Qiye slid to his knees, torn asunder with grief and anguish as he choked with sobs at the deserted battlefield. "Give him back to me." Hassan had taken away his father's head. End chapter.